And good to see everybody here tonight. In the fifth of the series of the listening room. And we started, I guess, back in October, September with Rob Bowman was here. And we did Stax Records because he had been a part of the Emmy-nominated series that they did on Stax Records. And Paul Hofford was here. And then we had Elaine Overholt. We had a great one downstairs, Alan Cross. And now this is one of my favorite people in the world, one of my favorite musicians, Pat Labarbera is here. So I wrote some words about Pat that I'm going to read, and I read mine first, just to make sure I got it wrong. So, Pat Labarbera stands as a towering figure in the world of jazz saxophone, a musician whose dedication to the craft and deep connection to the bebop tradition have left an indelible mark on both the Canadian and the international jazz scenes. Born in Mount Morris, New York, Labarbera's early exposure to music came from his father, a passionate drummer who instilled a love for swing and improvisation in his children. It wasn't long before Pat found himself drawn to the saxophone, inspired by the soaring lines of John Coltrane and the rhythmic complexity of Charlie Parker. His technical brilliance and emotional depth earned him a spot in the famed Buddy Rich Band during the early 70s, where his commanding tenor solos became a defining feature of the ensemble sound. Whether navigating blistering up-tempo runs or delivering a ballad with aching lyricism, Labarbera always approached the music with reverence and boundless energy. After years on the road with the richest hard-driving band, Labarbera settled in Toronto in the late 1970s, becoming a cornerstone of the city's vibrant jazz community. His presence brought a new level of sophistication to the local scene, and he quickly became a sought-after educator, mentor, and collaborator. With an approach that blends the technical rigor of his New York upbringing with the open-hearted lyricism of his music idols. Labarbera has influenced generations of Canadian musicians, teaching at Harvard College and performing alongside legends Elvin Jones and Willie Shaw. Whether on the stage or in an intimate club or in front of a festival crowd, his playing carries the weight of jazz history while remaining fiercely individual, fluid, passionate, and always searching for new and expressive possibilities. Pat Labarbera, welcome back. Feels like actor theater.
Wow.
Feels like they don't show.
I like that guy. I'd like to get to know him.
No, I get Brian Linehan, right? It's
Thanks for those words.
1937.
I don't know if you read Bill's posts on Facebook, but he is a great writer, and every week he has some great insights into politics, music, and what have you. So if you get a chance, follow him on Facebook.
You know, I always think about when I talk with Jesse. Me and Jesse have a radio show, my son, and when we did, in our discussions, we've read so many biographies, autobiographies, and stories and lives of musicians. And once they're successful, we're not interested.
Mm-hmm.
I find probably the most interesting time is the years between 13 and 15 and 16. And why I say that, I don't care who you are or what you are, it's a period of discovery. The outside world, if you find an instrument or something artistic to do or something that interests you, you throw yourself into it. And the world outside is what it is, it goes by, but you are so focused. What happened?
Well, my actual music upbringing started in the early 50s, 54 or 55, well, 53, because I started working in 1954 when I was 10 years old, or even younger with my father's band. So we just played music. It was part of the family tradition, and so we did, my brothers and myself, and my mother even played bass. So that's where it kind of started until I went to high school. And then I had a high school music teacher who was a bass player, and he was a jazz bass player, and I think he studied at Eastman in Rochester, New York, but he had a jazz background also, so he started introducing us to jazz records in school. We had a listening room, and he would give us a hall pass to cut the class to go down and listen to these recordings. So that's where I kind of got interested in jazz through him. But my father had the earlier stuff, the swing stuff, and the big band arrangements, and we played those things, and so I was playing all the time. At first reluctantly, because we wanted to go out and play baseball and do all of that, but We were going to talent shows, playing weddings, auditioned for Ted Mack and Mickey Mouse Club and all of those shows that were current at the time. We got beat out by Steve Gadd, the drummer on Mickey Mouse Club, because Steve Gadd played the drums and he could tap dance.
That's right.
My tap dancing was, so Steve won the Mickey Mouse Club from Rochester, New York. Anyway, we did all these things, but when I got into high school and started hearing jazz, it really hit me. And I was lucky in a town of like 4,000 people with a high school that had probably about 200 people in it. My school library had Downbeat magazine in there every couple of weeks, so I got a chance to look at this magazine and see what was going on in New York and who the current people were. Then we would save our lunch money, so when we got a chance to go to Rochester, we would buy albums, three brothers, and we'd save our lunch money and then go buy a record, an LP, and then just digest that and listen to it. So that's kind of my...
But that's the joy at that period in your life. Just going to a record store at the time.
Oh yeah, thumbing through, I still in vinyls.
You go through and you see Sonny Rollins, Colossus, and then you stand there and you stare at it,
No,
and then you go, I got no pocket change.
Yeah, no, you wait for the cutout, and usually what you do, but I always, on the road, you always look for vinyl stores. In LA, they had some great ones, Tower Records and those, but they're gone now. I mean, I have a tremendous vinyl collection. But that's what we did, we just listened to the recording, because you can only afford one record, and you just basically listen to that LP and listen. Then we used to get jazz radio from here. Phil McKellar used to have a jazz radio show from here that went across the lake, so I could get it in my bedroom upstairs, right? Get him.
CKFM?
I can't remember the station. I've got some tapes still of his shows, but he would play something, we'd listen to it, then we'd go try to buy the recording or look for something in Downbeat that referenced it. And we're trying to, because there was no internet. You just had to search and go to libraries and find this stuff.
We were the same thing with Downbeat magazine, because we started to take it in, I think, in 1960. And it would come with, you get the subscription, you would get like a Gil Evans record.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Right, because we had the Gil Evans, the big band, like the Pacific Jazz, which was just, wow, to have something like that. But I just remember the same thing, that I would go to the back of that and I'd go to Toronto. Pittsburgh.
You see who's playing that.
There's a bunch of all Pittsburgh. There's Art Blakey. Then you go to LA, Shelley's Manhole.
Yeah.
Then you go to New York, Slugs or something like that. And then you see Toronto goes, Mo Kaufman.
Mo Kaufman, yeah, Mo's.
He was in every issue.
Mo Kaufman, Pat Riccione, these were people that were playing all the time in Toronto, yeah. Well, we heard that radio station, and we get Sid McCoy from Chicago. He had over 50,000 watt station that went all across, and Sid McCoy would go from midnight to, I think, 4 in the morning. And he had a jazz station at that time. So that was our exposure at that. And
now, the Coltrane thing's a bit later. So what was earlier? Was it Sunday?
Oh, no, Jerry Mulligan, Stan Getson.
Okay.
Lester Young, Jerry Mulligan. Those were Jerry Mulligan and Lester Young were my two main people at that time. Lester Young still is a big influence on me, Jerry Mulligan. Even though you hear the Coltrane thing in there, there's always a little Lester sneaking in there. It was just part of who I was, and who I listened to early on, who I copied off the recordings. Because back then, you had a record player that had 78, 33, 16,
yeah.
Right? But the 16 was out of tune, a little bit sharp, but if you put a quarter on the arm, it would dig into the recording and slow it down so you could hear it at the right pitch. So that would be something that's the reason that we do. And the solos all sound, all slow, and we just try to copy it and then speed it up. It's just the technology of the time.
So it's also before it was jazz education in schools. So you had to learn a different way. You had either private instructors.
Yeah, there was no jazz education. I mean, Downbeat had that thing in the back, the inner ear, and that's where I learned
That's
harmony.
right. They had the Stan Kenton band.
And then when I went to college, it was the jazz was kind of frowned upon. You couldn't rehearse, the big band couldn't rehearse on campus. You had to rehearse off campus. Some of the schools, like Ithaca, New York, those schools had no practicing of jazz in the little plaques on the wall. Eastman School of Music would even discourage you from doing. I don't want to tell. Anyway, yeah, they did, even if you were playing on the outside, doing your own things. Like say I'm going to Humber College, but I played a gig downtown. And they would, not Humber, I'm saying Eastman would do that, they don't want you playing jazz if you're in the Eastman program. Now it's a big jazz school. The same as the school I went to, Potsdam State Teachers College, now has a great jazz program. But at that time, it was very, just very,
So how were your academics at school?
I was a B student, probably,
Okay.
I used the old adage, they threw me out of third grade because they needed my parking space. Or my guidance counselor told me I was going to be an astronaut because I took up space in school. Those are my games. But I was a B student. I was more interested in music, not really prolific in writing the way you write, but I got by. And then I went to college, and that was kind of a horror story.
That was Berkeley?
No, I went to Potsdam State. See, I was the first saxophone player in the state of New York that got what they used to call a scholarship. It was kind of like more of an incentive. They just basically paid your tuition. I was the first one on tenor saxophone that was allowed to go into school because they used the saxophone in wind ensembles, which were classical ensembles. So I got to go to Potsdam on this thing, and then I was the only one in New York State because everybody was you had to be a clarinet major, and then you would double on saxophone. So I went there, and of course my private teacher was a clarinet player, and the first thing he said to me was, "How did you ever get into the school?" Was the first, so that establishes a great relationship. Anyway, and then the wind ensemble needed a tenor saxophone player, and there was a great jazz saxophone player named Joe Roccasano. He was well known in the jazz world. He went to Potsdam, and he was there as a clarinet major, but he was auditioning for the wind ensemble because he played alto in the wind ensemble. So he auditioned me to get in the wind ensemble. And he said, "Yeah, you're okay." William Musser, you probably maybe know William Musser. He was a famous brass player. He conducted this thing. And my music teacher said, "No, I don't want him in there." So he nixed that. So I lasted one semester, and then I went home and worked in a factory. Yeah, I just gave it up. Yeah. Birdseye. I was working on the line. I was my first job. Yeah, I was cutting worms out of corn. Was my first job. Yeah, it was a Birdseye plant. Right?
Was it just for these TV dinners?
Well, I did that. I loaded the TV dinners. Yeah, the string beans with almonds was my big thing.
33 cents each.
Yeah, but I worked there loading boxcars and doing all of that stuff. I just went back home and just my tail between my legs and just started working in the factory.
And then.
And practicing every day and learning tunes. Like they had me on the line. I used to load pallets of the big platforms, wooden buildings, and you'd stack frozen food boxes would come down a conveyor belt. And you had to stack them a certain way, the way you put them to build it up to about 6 feet high. Press the buzzer, ring for the forklift, he would come, take the pallet away, put another pallet down, and then the boxes keep coming down.
I don't know why you didn't stay there.
Well, how I thought was, this is a dumb job. Why don't I make something out of it? So I learned, I took all my tunes on an index card. I had a big wooden post next to me, and a thumbtack every day. And I'll put up all the chord changes that, so let's say All the Things You Are was my first tune. And the box would come down and I'd go, G minor 7, C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, E minor 7 flat 5, A 7 flat 9, D major. So I learned all my tunes by rote, just by visually looking at the card. Then I would get home and I'd play the chords on here and then work on the melodies. And the next, it took me 2 or 3 days to learn one tune, then I would do another tune. Now it's an app on the phone called the iReal book. But back then, it basically plotted it out the same way.
Yeah, and what we had, I guess, early on was the first edition of Fake Books then.
Yeah,
the series that just sort of arrived and you go, oh.
Yeah, those were the real books in Boston.
Yeah, the original ones.
And Steve Swallow and those guys were involved. And I remember when those came out. But before that, there was earlier fake books that my father had. Because my father had a complete library. Because my father led bands in town. He had a community band. He had a marching band. They had clown bands. We had dance bands. And so he had all these different bands and all the repertoire. My father's basement, we had 3 pianos in the house, every instrument in the house from upright bass to tuba, sousaphone, violin, C melody saxophones, metal clarinets. He had every instrument in the house, so it was always there for us.
Those big band gigs back then were the longest gigs of my life.
Because back then,
Melodies.
you played, with my father's band, it was 55 minutes on, 5 minutes off, you know, basically that was it, you know. And you do 3 or 4 sets, you know, you're playing a wedding, and, you know, that's just the
And
way
the
it was.
tunes would just keep rolling.
You know, it was like medleys, and
Yeah,
it was ethnic music of, you know, we come from a Sicilian family, right? So it was all the Italian mazurkas and polkas and those tunes also for Italian weddings.
I just remember unfolding the music and it'd be like this in front of me. And then I see somewhere towards the end, blank, just 2 notes that I get to play. That wasn't just a background chord, and I'd wait the whole thing and just time, here comes my solo.
Yeah, boy, did
Like, but that's kind of the era though, you know, you're playing for your society bands.
That's what it was, pop music of the day, you know.
Yeah.
How much is that dog in the window, you know, Oh My Papa, and all the, you know, Peggy Lee, Frank Sinatra tunes, the Casaloma Orchestra charts, all the Glenn Miller stuff, Perry Como, Eddie Fisher, those things that were hits of the day. I mean, that was the music that everybody was listening to.
But you know something, it also gave you a sense of the melodies.
Yeah, that's,
And the structure of the tunes, because the tunes, a lot of those tunes that were played then came out and went into bebop, stripped down chords, and they became another song. I Remember April or something like that. They found their way into the jazz vocabulary.
that's how I learned. I also took, when I was in Potsdam, basically flunking out of school, the Berkeley School of Music published their correspondence course in Downbeat magazine, the last 2 or 3 pages. So every other week they would have the correspondence course. And then I did the harmony lessons. So I learned all about 2-5-1, sub 2-5s, all of the chord progressions. And then I realized all these songs are all made up of just certain chord progressions. You hear it, you hear it, of course, it comes from classical literature, you know, concert music, but the standard tunes took all of that stuff and used those lines. So if you hear 1-1-7-4, 4 minor, you hear that, then you know that's like, it could be Cherokee, it could be the last 4 bars of rhythm changes. You hear the line going through it. That's how Chet Baker and the Stan Getz, the guys who played by ear, that's how they heard it. They heard how the lines went through the harmony. They knew the 2 and 4 bar chord patterns, and they just knew the sound of it in their ear because they heard the lines go through it.
And they didn't have to think.
Well, yeah, Chet didn't, Stan could read changes a little better than Chet, but Chet just played by ear, totally, you could just hear it all, from playing with the radio as a kid.
But also, I think one of the things that the good practice from that time was just a focus on melody. A song had a melody to it, and you couldn't get past the melody because the melody was the first thing that you dealt with.
That's it. I mean, for me, that's what it was in the beginning, just learn how to play those melodies. That's how I still practice. Sometimes I'll just put a fake book up or just start playing. That's what I was doing here before. I was just playing old tunes that come to my mind, trying to hear where the harmony goes, but listening. And I'm pretty good with lyrics too. I know a lot of lyrics of songs. I don't know why that is. Well, I know why it is, because I had an English teacher, Mrs. Page, who made us learn poems and stand up in front of the class. So we had to recite The Raven, you know, Stopping by Woods, Robert Frost, Ode to a Grecian Urn, and all of these different poems. You had to learn those. So I learned, the way I learned poems, that's how I learned songs, by learning chord changes that way.
Do you want to play something for us on tenor?
Yeah, I would.
You know, just give us something like a melody and how you would just maybe
Well, okay, here's some.
play a variation off of it and stuff.
Well, I just played this earlier, so I can play it again. Anyway, that's kind of a... Who knows the tune? Anybody know? Can't hear it.
I thought I did, but I can't.
I'm playing it because I've been playing with Chet Baker, we recorded it. It's one of I think Don Thompson actually, anyway, Don Thompson and I played this a lot. I think it was a special tune for him. It's called I Married an Angel.
Oh.
It's an old turkey tune, you know, it's got some really nice chord changes to it, and very simple, you know, 1, 2, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, and that's, again, from coming to learning those tunes, it's like thinking figured bass, I guess, you know, I know the numbers of the harmony, where it's supposed to go. So it's 1, 2 minor 7, 3 minor 7, 6 dominant 7 flat, 9 flat, 13, you know, so it's all this mathematical stuff that you figure out. But don't forget, it's like, how many years have I been playing? I mean, I'm 80 now, so as I started in 54.
Yeah.
There's a lot of years of knowing this stuff and hearing it in your head. It just stays there.
And so basically what you're doing, you know, you're just outlining the chords. After you play the melody, you're just weaving it out.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay, the melody's
Close to the
in my
melody.
head. Yeah, I try to remember the melody, but I try to keep the melody in mind. Eventually, sometimes you get away from it, but it's always nice to come back to the melody. It's always there. And the old saying is, the best solo ever written on a set of chord changes was the melody, probably. So it's probably better than anything you can come up with.
And that's what Monk said too.
Is he, yeah?
That was, I think it's part of his principles, you know, is that, you know, understand and know the melody of a song.
Yeah, Monk was something else to watch and see. I'll tell you a Monk story. When we were in high school, my brothers and my mother and father went to New York City, and we had a trailer. They had a trailer. We slept in a tent, but they had a trailer. And we went to a trailer park in New Jersey, and then we at night would get on the subway, go across into Manhattan, and just start walking around, go to Berlin. I remember went to a phone booth, picked up the phone book, opened up the phone book, looked in, found Thelonious Monk's number, and called him on the phone. He didn't answer, so we get Jerry Mulligan's number, called Jerry Mulligan, he answered, where are you playing? Who's this? Where are we? So their names were listed in the phone book, you know. So we'd go to Berlin, and Dizzy Gillespie was playing at the time, and I remember going there, and the guys, we would go in like almost every night for a week. And once they got to see us, they'd seat us in what they used to call the milk gallery, you know, where the kids could sit up there without having any alcohol served in that area. And they got to know us when we went in. But that was kind of, and then later on, when I was with Elton Jones's band, we would see Monk all the time. And when I was with Buddy Rich's band, we actually did a tour for George Wein where there was an all-star band where there was Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Stitt, who was it? Anyway, I can't remember, Kai Winding. Anyway, they were on the same tour with us, so we got to see them backstage and stand in the wings and watch them play.
It's an amazing experience, isn't it?
Yeah, to see them live, like right in front of you playing, especially Sonny Stitt, who I had later run-ins with him, who was really nice to me, Sonny Stitt. I'm going to tell me my Sonny Stitt story.
Bring Stitt with you.
Okay, well, Sonny Stitt was a hero of mine, and when I was in Berkeley, one of the tenor players said I used to sit in with Sonny Stitt. He would always try to play Cherokee, these hard tunes in D flat or B or F sharp. So I was playing with Buddy Rich in Chicago at Mr. Kelly's, and it was the club owner named Joe Siegel. He ran the Jazz Showcase, and he came by and said, "Look, it's Sonny Stitt's birthday. Why don't you come down to the club after Buddy's set and sit in with Sonny Stitt?" So I went down there, and they introduced me to Sonny Stitt. And we got to talking because I'd heard that Sonny was into hypnosis, and I was into dabbling in it at the time. We talked, and then we went on stage. And so Sonny Stitt comes out, and I had practiced Cherokee all day in the key of B. So he comes out and he just walks on stage and goes, "Afternoon in Paris." He starts counting. Now, there was a young trumpet player had come up on stage also. I'm playing 3 veteran, Jody Christian, Wilbur Campbell. It was really heavy Chicago guys. And the trumpet player came up, young guy, he comes up with me. And then suddenly goes to count the tune off, and he goes, I don't know that tune. I don't know. So now Sonny's upset. He's mad. And so he's looking at this kid, and he goes, "Well, what do you want to play?" And the kid says nothing. So he looks at me. "What do you want to play?" I said, "How about Confirmation?" Now that's like a tricky Charlie Parker tune that I had studied since I was, in high school. And then he looks at me like, "Oh, you want to play Confirmation?" I'm like, "Oh, gee, I'm just sorry, I brought it up." So he counts off the tune. The minute I got through playing the head with him, he was just so nice to me. We played Happy Birthday in B flat. He played Cherokee in the right key. And then, I got to see him later on the road, and he was very nice to me. But having known that repertoire, if I had said, "I don't know that tune," it would have been off the list.
That was kind of the treatment, though.
Yeah, I mean, that was brutal back then. I never liked those kinds of cutting sessions. I stopped going to them because it got to be a point where you're just trying to flex your muscles and not make music, But
So Charlie Parker, this short story. Did you meet Virginia Wicks? Virginia Wicks was a publicist for Ella Fitzgerald and for Charlie Parker, and also for Dizzy Gillespie.
I don't think I did.
She was in her 80s, and we sit down, and we were at the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival out in Moscow, Idaho. We're sitting there, and I'm interviewing her. And I asked her, I said, what was that one missed opportunity in life? And she goes, "Well, I was a beautiful woman." She was a model, and she became Arlene Francis and Nat King Cole's publicist, all by accident.
Oh, okay.
So she goes, "I go to Birdland, and I get me a table because I'm going to see Charlie Parker." And I'm sitting there, and I'm just mesmerized. Comes off the bandstand, and he sits down in front of me. He starts talking to me, and he goes, "I'm going to write you a poem." She goes, "Okay, here's the come on." What come on? That's a good one. So he gets a napkin, and he writes a poem for her, and leaves it to her, and then walks away. He goes, "There it is." And walks off and everything. She goes, walks away, gets in a cab. She goes, "Charlie Parker wrote me a poem." What'd I do? What did I just do? And she runs back and gets there, and everybody been drinking. It got spilled on her. And she goes, "There's 3 words I think I can make out." But I mean, Birdland must have been the place too. And
Yeah,
Charlie
I got to go there, a little bit while the club was open at the time. Yeah. Did you ever watch that Clint Eastwood documentary? Was the interviewer said, what's the greatest acting lesson you ever got? And he said, "The greatest acting lesson I ever got was I was in the Navy or the Army. I think it was in the Navy or whatever. I was up stationed in San Francisco, and Charlie Parker had a concert that night, and I went to the concert, and he said, I watched Charlie Parker walk out on stage with such confidence, and the way he played and led the band, he said, that's the greatest acting lesson I ever had." It's not an interview with Clint Eastwood, anyway.
But it was true, because there's also the interviews of Charlie Parker.
I never got to see him. I mean, I was alive and playing when he was alive, but of course he was in New York City, and things were different. I didn't know who Charlie Parker was.
But so then, how did you get past Sonny Rollins?
Well, Sonny, I know Sonny very well. We're fairly good friends, and we talk every.
Because he was like just somewhere in that mix between stepping into this next era. He's in that mix, but he's kind of like.
Well, he was another one of my, I just, I copied a lot of his stuff. We do a Sonny Rollins tribute, like Merle and I did one, Alex Dean and I do one, and I always loved what he did, because Sonny to me was what I call a thematic improviser, where he has his set patterns, but he's really working off like the melody and the theme, and Paul Desmond was the other